Yosef saw his brothers and recognized them. He acted toward them as a stranger, and he accused them of being spies. Was Yosef just being vengeful, or did he have some kind of plan? That's the question of the week. Well, certainly, when we encounter the pshat of the text, the notion that Yosef is exacting vengeance, that he is intentionally causing anxiety and fear, well, frankly, that's the interpretation that most readily presents itself. And just consider the many words and phrases which serve to underscore the severity of Yosef's actions. Vayitnaker alehem. He disguised himself, made himself as a foreign person to them, which Sepharno understands to mean that he masked his characteristic humility and gentleness. Vayidaber itam kashot. He spoke with them harshly. And after they initially denied being spies, he says, Lo, no, you are spies. You've come to see the nakedness of the land. And then, of course, he throws them into jail for 3 days. The vengeance taking theory, unappealing though it may be, can hardly be dismissed. In fact, Exhibit A in how hard it is to dismiss the vengeance taking theory are the words of a commentary who is deeply committed to debunking that theory, who is deeply committed to the notion that Yosef has a plan. That commentary is Ramban. And as we read his words, we will see the way in which Ramban himself struggles with all of the features of this short narrative that would seem to suggest that Yosef is in fact acting out of anger and vengeance. Let's look a little bit at Ramban's words. Ramban says that when Yosef saw the 10 brothers bowing down to him, what he thought to himself was, wow, in my dreams, the first dream involves 11 sheaves of grain bowing down to me. And the second dream involves 11 stars plus the sun and the moon. What I'm seeing right now is a fulfillment of neither dream. So I'm going to figure out a way to get Binyamin down here so that the first dream can be fulfilled. And then in turn, we'll figure out a way for the second dream to be fulfilled as well. That's Ramban's understanding of Yosef's thinking, of his plan in that moment. And as if needing to convince himself of what he just said, Ramban continues that Al Kain, and this is the only explanation for Yosef's decision to not immediately at this point say, Ani Yosef, I am Yosef, your brother. Because then Yaakov would have come down immediately and poof, there go the dreams. Certainly, there go the dreams in their proper sequence. Not, God forbid, that Yosef is seeking vengeance. So Ramban says. But his very next words are the words of an exegete who knows he is on shaky ground. You know, if you don't say this, Yosef would be guilty of a great sin, bringing aggravation and pain to his father, who, in addition to Yosef's absence, is now going to be suffering Shimon's absence as well. And then Ramban says, even if he wanted to cause his brothers a little bit of pain and anxiety, how could he not have had compassion upon his father? Ramban is very worried about the fact pattern that emerges here. And even still, he has not yet convinced himself of his own Yosef has a plan theory, for he continues and says, you know, you've got to say this, because otherwise, how do you explain how Yosef has been vizier of Egypt for 9 years, and in all this time, he has not sent even a note to his father telling him that he's alive? It must be, it can't be other than the fact that Yosef has a plan here, but he's not taking vengeance. I don't know. Anger and vengeance taking really do seem to fit the fact pattern in the story a whole lot better than Yosef having a benign plan concerning the fulfillment of the dreams. Not to mention the fact that Ramban doesn't answer what is the most important challenge to his theory. Why is it so important to fulfill the dreams? Couldn't Yosef have said, to heck with the dreams? They're not worth the aggravation. Would that have been so terrible? In Nitziv's effort to answer that question, in which he says that the dreams were sort of a prophecy, and for Yosef to not enable their fulfillment would have been the sin of suppressing prophecy. Well, that answer raises more ethical questions than it solves. In short, the most valiant and comprehensive effort to portray Yosef's actions as being a plan to fulfill the dreams, not, God forbid, the taking of vengeance or the expression of grievance or anger, doesn't really pass the smell test. The pshat really seems to point in a different direction. What I'd like to actually propose is a different solution altogether, that this is neither A nor B. Yosef neither has a plan, at least at this moment in the story, nor is he exacting vengeance or expressing anger per se. It was actually something else. And I base this suggestion on the commentary of Radak, who suggests that at that moment, the biggest worry in Yosef's mind was that one of his brothers would be looking at him through slanted eyes and saying, "Hey, wait a second. Do we know that guy? That guy looks really familiar." And that the reason Yosef spoke harshly and accused them the way he accused them was that there was only one thing going through his mind, and that was, I mustn't let them figure out who I am. I've got to convince them that the person standing in front of them, despite superficial similarities to someone they know quite well, is actually nothing more and nothing less than some lousy, no good member of the Egyptian bureaucracy, not anybody related to them. In other words, it was not vengeance that Yosef was seeking in that moment. It was not anger or grievance that he was expressing. He was rather he was rather trying to ensure that he not be identified, that the brothers not figure out who he actually is. And why this desperation? Because as he looked at them bowing before him, he remembered the dreams, as the very next pasuk said. And instantly he remembered the jealousy, the pettiness, the silly competitiveness that characterized his youth, and the completely disproportionate reaction to his silliness and pettiness that his brothers in turn expressed. And we have every right to assume that Yosef has been spending the past decades doing everything that he can to suppress and bury all of these memories so that he never has to face them or think about them again. But now, as he sees his brothers before him, as he sees them bowing before him, he is recognizing that this is all going to come back now, that the memories that he had been trying so hard to bury deep in the ground are here showing up literally once again. Unless he could somehow successfully hide from them in plain sight. thus his desperation to simply not be identified. And that's the explanation for what he is doing in this initial conversation when his brothers first come down to Egypt. Now, once he had the brothers in jail for 3 days, Yosef began to realize that this can't go on forever, that he's going to have to find some other way to deal with this. And that's when the story becomes even more intriguing. And this is something, by the way, that we're all familiar with. We all have memories, stories, events, interactions that we would so much love to suppress and make go away and bury in a place where they'll never come back. We'll never have to think about them again. But as Rabbi Soloveitchik says in a slightly different context, the context of tshuva, of repentance, says we suppress bad memories, embarrassing memories, unpleasant memories, painful memories. We suppress them really at a price because they are often the most important engines for change if we allow them to be so. They are memories from which we can learn so much about ourselves and others and how the world works. They are memories through which, if we know how to marshal them, we can redeem ourselves, our past, in fact, our lives. Yosef in this story is someone who, like everybody, comes face to face with a memory he had tried to suppress and tries now to bury it even deeper so that it just can't come up for air, so that he doesn't have to face it again. Fortunately, the narrative arc here in Bereshit does not allow that to happen. And as a result, we get the story of a human individual, namely Yosef, redeemed, of brothers redeemed, and ultimately of a family that will soon be a nation redeemed. Maybe it wasn't vengeance taking, nor did he have a plan. He was trying to engage in an act of suppression that we can see would have been a terrible mistake. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments about looking at the story this way. Thanks for listening.